Have you ever felt that your anger didn't come from what others did, but from the sense that you had no choice but to explode? No one touched you, yet inside something was burning, scorching your clarity, swallowing your dignity, and leaving you in an empty silence filled with regret. That's how anger works. It doesn't need a reason. It just needs an opening, and then it spins its own story. And by the time you realize it, it's no longer just an emotion, it's become a way of life. In this world, you're not hurt by what people say, but by how you let their words define you. No one has power over you until you react as if they do. This video doesn't teach you to stay calm. It reveals where anger begins and where you can end it. Not through weakness, but through a deeper strength. Not resistance, but no compromise. Not silence, but no trap. We'll walk into the fire, not to put it out, but to learn how to pass through it without being burned. 1. Don't believe the first story you tell yourself. Anger often doesn't begin with what happened, but with the way we retell it in our minds. A glance that doesn't linger, and we assume they're ignoring us. A message read but unanswered, and we assume we've been disrespected. A careless word, and we assign it a malicious intent. But events are just events. Anger is what we create when we rush to fill the silence with a story we never verified. The real danger isn't others, it's how quickly we convince ourselves that we're right. When emotion flares up, the brain doesn't need truth, it just needs a reason. Any reason will do, so long as it justifies how we feel inside. And once we've assigned a negative meaning to an action, we stop treating others based on facts and start treating them through the lens of our distorted narrative. We punish them for something they may not have done. We react as though we've been betrayed, when in truth, it might have been a misunderstanding never brought to light. Worse, we hold on to those stories like verdicts never up for review. We get angry not because someone was wrong, but because we believed our interpretation of them was absolute. Philosophy doesn't come to make you weak in the face of pain. It comes to help you see clearly the mechanism by which you hurt yourself further, because you can't untie a knot if you don't know where it was tied wrong. When Epictetus said, "It's not things themselves that disturb us, but our interpretation of them," he was pointing to a truth most modern minds still reject, that pain doesn't come from others' actions, but from our hasty judgments of those actions. You can't live in peace if your mind constantly writes scripts based on suspicion. And you can't master anger if you keep trusting the first thought that comes to mind. Because that first thought is usually led by fear, not reason. It's the echo of old wounds, past hurts, and a fragile ego trying to protect itself. And when those things dictate the story we tell ourselves, we no longer see reality. We only see shadows we've created, and we rage because they don't match what we hoped for. Learn to pause. Not to suppress your anger, but to check whether the map you're using is even accurate. Ask, what am I thinking about what just happened? What story just played out in my mind? Is it true, or just an emotional projection? Just a few seconds of awareness and you'll realize your emotion isn't wrong, but the reason it flared up might not even be real. The strong are not those who never get angry. They are those who can sit with their anger and ask, "Am I sure I understand this correctly?" In that pause lies a power greater than any reaction. Because you're no longer acting like a provoked animal, but like an awakened human directing yourself. And that is the beginning of inner freedom. One day you'll realize, most of the things that kept you up at night were never worth your attention. Not because they became lighter, but because you looked back and saw clearly. You once believed in a false story. Every time you choose to pause, you avoid being dragged into emotional quicksand. Every time you question the first story, you prevent an unnecessary war. The world is not short of heartless people, but the one who hurts you most is often yourself when you rush to believe what's unclear and then live as if it were final truth. Don't believe the first story you tell yourself. Doubt it. Try rewriting it with a calmer mind, because sometimes changing the story is all it takes to change how you feel. And once you master that, no one can control you again. 2. Expect that people will disappoint you. We don't get hurt because of who people are. We get hurt because we expected them to be different. Someone lies, and we're not just upset by the lie, we're upset because we thought they'd be honest. Someone turns their back on us, and what stings isn't the act itself, but the memory of what we believed would last. Disappointment begins not with the behavior, but with expectation. And the more blindly we place our trust in an idealized image of others, the more shattered we are when the truth appears. No one enters this world carrying a contract promising they'll never hurt us. Each person lives according to their own level of awareness. They say what they believe, do what they think is right, and sometimes unknowingly wreck part of another's soul without realizing what they've done. But pain wouldn't exist if we hadn't cast them in the role of our happiness. When you expect someone to always be kind, always be understanding, always be on time, always read your mind, you stop seeing them as a human and start treating them like a statue you carved. And then you rage not because they are bad, but because they no longer match the mold you built in your mind. Philosophy doesn't teach us to be pessimistic, it teaches us to let go of illusion. The wise do not place faith in perfection. They understand that a person is a mixture of instinct, limits, selfishness, kindness, pain, and unspoken darkness. The more clearly you see that, the less surprised you'll be. And when betrayal no longer surprises you, it no longer controls your emotions. Imagine walking into a crowded market. You don't expect everyone to move aside, smile, or be gentle. You enter prepared for jostling, for noise, for bumps. And because you're prepared, you don't get angry. You're not shaken by the chaos. You keep your calm like a river moving through the noise without losing its depth. Life is the same. The crowd won't change for you, but you can choose to move through it with a different mindset. Expecting people to disappoint you doesn't mean giving up on humanity. It simply means you stop seeing kindness as guaranteed. You're grateful when people are good, but you don't collapse when they're not. You know everyone is fighting their own battle, and sometimes that makes them selfish, dishonest, cowardly, or careless. But instead of turning those actions into reasons for anger, you see them as steps on a path the other person hasn't yet completed. And you don't have to carry rage for a journey that isn't yours. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "Every morning, remind yourself that today you will meet people who are selfish, deceitful, arrogant, and treacherous." But he didn't write this to become bitter. He wrote it to avoid surprise, to remain emotionally steady, to keep compassion alive without letting his heart be torn apart by others' behavior. When you accept the truth that people will lie, will fail you, will change you, stop fearing when it happens, because you are ready. Peace doesn't come from a kind world. It comes from no longer demanding the world to fit your expectations. Others may still be careless, still judge, still hurt you, but if you understand the nature of this and no longer act surprised, you'll no longer be destroyed. You won't react like an abandoned child, but like someone who has grown through understanding. And then, every time you're betrayed, you won't ask, "Why did they do this to me?" You'll remind yourself, "I knew this could happen, and I won't let it steal the best parts of me." That's the moment you step out of the victim role and rise as someone no longer controlled by others' actions. Low expectations are not a sign of a cold heart. They are the strategy of a clear mind. When you stop placing others on a pedestal, you begin to walk firmly on the ground. And from that ground, you can see them more clearly, not needing to worship nor to hate, only to see them exactly as they are. 3. If you can't control the voice in your head, you control nothing at all. You can be silent with the whole world. But if you can't quiet the screaming inside your own mind, that silence means nothing. Because your greatest enemy isn't the one who insulted you. It's the voice in your head that repeats that insult 1,000 times. It's not the external situation, it's the undercurrent in your thoughts turning it into catastrophe. You're not crushed by what happens, but by the sentences you whisper to yourself. I'm not good enough. They don't respect me. I'm always the one left behind. These are no longer thoughts, they've become an internal sentence. And you are condemned by none other than yourself without needing a judge or a courtroom. The first thing Stoic philosophy trains us in is not endurance and not pretending to be calm. It's the retraining of that inner voice, the voice we hear more clearly than anyone else's, and the voice with the greatest power to destroy us if left unchecked. You might control your schedule, your meals, your words to others. But if you can't control your internal dialogue, all that control is a fragile shell. One small jolt is enough to collapse you from within. Anger, at its core, isn't a reaction to reality. It's a reaction to the story you tell yourself. You're not angry because someone said something offensive. You're angry because you replayed that line over and over, each time adding bitterness, self-pity, and a darker interpretation. And then that sentence, which was just a gust of wind, becomes a storm, not from them, from you. If you can pause and ask, what am I saying to myself right now? You'll start to see the source of suffering. It's not the event, it's the interpretation. Not their words, but the echo of those words in your mind. And once you see it clearly, you gain a chance to change, not by forcing yourself to forget, but by choosing better words. Instead of repeating, "They don't respect me," try asking, "Does their action truly define who I am?" Instead of saying, "I should have reacted more strongly," ask, "Was calmness actually a form of strength in that moment?" Change begins in how you choose to speak to yourself. A strong person isn't someone who never gets hurt. It's someone who stops hurting themselves with the language of anger and blame. Marcus Aurelius didn't write meditations to lecture others. He wrote it for himself to recalibrate his inner voice every day. He reminded himself, don't be swept away by emotion. Don't let others' words dictate your actions. Don't say to yourself what a rational mind should never believe. And he didn't write because he was always in control, but because he knew that without practice, the mind becomes the most dangerous traitor. You don't need to conquer the world, but you must master the echo chamber in your head. Because if you don't know who's speaking in there, you'll believe whatever it whispers. And the terrifying truth is, most of us go our whole lives without ever questioning our inner voice. We let it lead us without knowing where it came from. Fear, distorted memories, or some outdated belief we should have let go of long ago. Mastering your inner world doesn't mean forcing positivity. It means sitting in the middle of the storm in your mind, listening to every sentence, and choosing which ones deserve to stay. It's the hardest work because no one else can do it for you. But if you succeed, you'll see. Nothing out there can bring you down unless you repeat it inside yourself. 4. Between emotion and reaction, there's always a pause. Find it. There are moments when you feel like you're no longer yourself. A sudden insult, a disrespectful gesture, a situation that turns too quickly and you snap. You say what you shouldn't, do what you regret. You react as if a button inside you was pressed, no choice, just a chain of impulsive moves followed by regret, shame, self-reproach. But the truth is, you did have a choice. You just didn't see it, because between the surge of emotion and the burst of reaction, there is always a pause. A moment so small it's easy to miss. But if you find it, if you seize it, you reclaim your power. People often confuse instinct with reaction. Instinct is biological, but reaction is a choice even if it happens too quickly for us to notice. You can't stop your heart from racing when insulted, but you can choose not to fire back with venom. You can't stop the adrenaline when you're treated unfairly, but you can stop your hand from smashing something. The difference between an instinct-driven person and one of depth lies in that moment, the moment they stay calm enough not to leap into the fire, but to stand outside and observe the flames. Stoic philosophy doesn't teach you to suppress your anger. It teaches you to see it, to put it on the table, question it, examine its motive. Because when emotion stays in the dark, it controls you, but when you bring it into the light, it loses its power. Like flipping the breaker before the current surges through. People lose control not because they're too angry, but because they don't know they can slow down. They were never taught that between emotion and reaction, there is a sacred pause. It's not loud, not dramatic. It just asks one question: do I really need to do this? Viktor Frankl, the Holocaust survivor and psychiatrist, once wrote, "Between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space is our power to choose. In that choice lies our growth and our freedom." These words didn't come from a philosopher behind a desk, but from a man who witnessed the ugliest side of humanity. And he didn't let the instinct for vengeance drown out his humanity. He chose the pause to hold on to himself in a world gone mad. In practice, the pause may be as short as 3 breaths. It's the moment you don't reply to that message right away. It's the step you stop mid-stride instead of charging into confrontation. It's the glance you shift away instead of locking eyes with provocation. The pause doesn't make you weak. It's the declaration of someone who isn't pulled around by emotion. It's the mark of someone who doesn't need to win every argument because they've already won within themselves. The pause doesn't mean you accept disrespect. It simply means you're clear-headed enough to choose a response that builds long-term strength, not short-term satisfaction. You can say what needs to be said, but not in the moment you want to scream it. You can walk away, but not because you were offended, rather because you've thought it through. Every response that follows a pause carries the signature of a free mind. People will keep provoking you to react. They want to see you shatter, lose control, explode because it gives them power. But when you pause, you not only protect your dignity, you shake their power. Because no one can manipulate a person who has separated emotion from reaction. Next time, when you feel blood rushing to your head, your chest burning, your throat tightening, don't pretend you're not angry. Acknowledge it. I'm angry, deeply angry. But right after that, find the pause. It's there, always there. And when you step into it, you're no longer a puppet of instinct. You are the author, rewriting your own script. 5. Not everything thrown at you belongs to you. There are days you wake up still yourself, but by the end, you feel wounded, stained by words that weren't yours, emotions that weren't yours, and battles that were never yours to fight. People throw you contemptuous glances, malicious words, rude behavior. You did nothing to provoke, yet you're still attacked. And reflexively, you bring all that home, carry it inside, mull it over, feel hurt, grow angry as if it were part of you, but it's not. Not everything others throw at you belongs to you. You have the right to reject it. the right to look at an insult without internalizing it, the right to let someone else's anger pass through you without making it your own. It's like standing in front of someone throwing mud. The mud hitting you may be unavoidable, but holding on to that mud, smearing it on your face, pressing it to your chest, clutching it through the night, that is a choice. And most inner suffering doesn't come from the first blow, it comes from our decision to hold on. Epictetus once said, "Others may insult you, but it is you who chooses to feel insulted." That doesn't mean denying your emotions. It means choosing not to let those emotions define who you are. A criticism doesn't make you worthless unless you believe it's true. An insult doesn't diminish your value unless you let it shape your self-worth. What others carry is their story. Don't let them turn it into your burden. Cruelty isn't a reflection of your worth. It's a reflection of their poison. And like an overflowing cup, it has to spill. They're not throwing anything of yours at you. They're throwing their inner chaos, unresolved fears, unhealed wounds. You just happen to be standing nearby, but you have no obligation to carry any of it. Peace doesn't come from living in a world free of malice. It comes from not letting malice reach your core. It's not indifference, it's discernment. Like a gatekeeper of the soul, you must learn to say, "This does not belong to me," and close the door. You don't need to argue to prove you're not what they say. You don't need to fight back to balance every wrong. What you need is the clarity to know when silence is strength and when walking away is self-respect. Every time you refuse to absorb someone's emotional garbage, you preserve your mind from becoming a battlefield created by someone else. Picture your life as a table. People will place many things on it: praise, criticism, prejudice, envy, expectations, disappointment. But that table has limits. If you don't learn to clear it, there won't be room for what truly belongs to you: peace, kindness, your core values. Every time you nod at an insult, you've made space for someone to sit down and dine in your mind, uninvited. You may not control how others treat you, but you can always choose how to protect your inner stillness. That is the space they cannot reach. It is a private territory you must guard with awareness and self-respect. And sometimes that defense is simply a quiet response. No, I do not accept this. Next time someone tries to dump their pain onto you, don't absorb it as your own. Look at them not with resentment, but with understanding. Perhaps they're carrying something invisible to you. But even in understanding, you can still say no. You can stand still in the storm, watch their anger crash like waves, and walk away without carrying a single drop. 6. Let go quickly, before it sinks deep. What destroys your peace isn't the first wound. It's holding on to it for too long, turning it over, clawing at it with old memories, old words and emotions that died long ago but are resurrected every time you think back. What you need to learn isn't perfect forgiveness. What you need is release. Fast. Before it takes root in your mind and becomes a part of your identity, one you never meant to wear. Letting go doesn't mean weakness. Letting go doesn't mean denial. Letting go is the conscious severing of something quietly gnawing at you from the inside. It's the courage to stop being a long-term victim. It's the short but firm declaration, "I no longer live in the past," because every time you hold on to an insult, a cruel word, a betrayal, you allow it to continue in your mind long after it's ended in reality. People often mistake holding on to pain as a way of remembering the lesson. But a true lesson doesn't need to be repeated through daily suffering. You don't need to carry the fire to remember it once burned you. You don't need to hold the broken piece to prove someone once let you fall. A real lesson begins when you move forward lighter, clearer, and without dragging the past behind you. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "Ask yourself, is this still worth disturbing my peace of mind?" That question is brutally simple. It strips away every excuse that you need more time, more reasons, more justice. No, what you need is clarity. Do you want peace? If yes, then letting go is a choice, not an outcome. And that release demands nothing from anyone else but you. The longer you hold on to a negative emotion, the more it demands to rule your mind. It seeps into your thinking, your speech, your view of others. You begin to doubt people who've done nothing wrong. You start defending yourself before you've even been hurt. You become the version of yourself they no longer need to attack because you're already self-destructing. Picture each wound as a hot stone. Someone may throw it at you that's out of your control. But if you grip it tightly, keep it close, clutch it to your chest, then the pain no longer comes from them, but from your choice. Letting go early isn't just wise, it's an act of mercy toward yourself. You don't need to speak forgiveness aloud. You just need to stop repeating the story. Stop using it as an excuse. Stop letting it define your next relationship. Stop letting it blur your trust in goodness. You don't forgive because they deserve it. You let go because you don't want your soul shackled to something already dead. Forgiveness sometimes says nothing. It's simply the silence of someone who has stepped out of the past and doesn't look back. The Stoics didn't believe in nursing wounds. They believed in dealing with them and then moving forward. Seneca once said, "We suffer more than we need to, only because we keep holding on to what should have been let go long ago." Life is too short to relive the same pain over and over. Every day you carry old anger, you're turning away from a calmer, wiser version of yourself. Next time you feel something pulling you back, pause and ask, is it still worth it? If not, let go. Not for anyone else, but because you deserve freedom from what ended long ago, yet still occupies space in your mind. And remember, letting go is never too late, but the sooner you do, the more freely you live. 7. Everything that makes you angry is a training ground for the soul. Every time you feel anger, don't react immediately. Step back and look directly at that emotion. Ask yourself silently, what am I being trained in right now? Because life doesn't present ideal situations for you to showcase polished virtue. Life throws you messy challenges, sharp contradictions, and broken people to see how steady you truly are. Anger isn't the enemy, it's a mirror reflecting how prepared your inner world is for sudden impact. Anger doesn't arise by accident. It's a warning that something within you hasn't been sufficiently trained. An expectation not yet released. A belief not yet strong enough. An ego not yet cleansed. People can say what they want. Life can unfold in ways you didn't choose. But as long as you cling to the idea that everything must go your way, you'll remain vulnerable to anger. So every outburst is a signal from within. There's still a weakness, still something to train. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "The obstacle in the path becomes the path." That doesn't just apply to failure, it applies to anger too. The thing that disturbs you most is often where your soul needs the most work. The person who drives you mad is also the one whose presence can help you cultivate calm. The situation that frustrates you is the exact arena to train acceptance. The agitation you think is breaking you is really showing you what needs to be rebuilt from the ground up. Someone hurts you, and you respond with anger. But if you're aware enough, you'll recognize it as a chance to practice compassion in adversity. Something unfair or unjust throws you off. But if you're centered, you'll realize it's a test of your ability to act without losing your dignity. You can lash out as a reflex, or you can use anger as a signal to observe, to adjust, to grow. The difference lies not in the circumstance, but in the attitude. The Stoics didn't teach us to become stone statues in the face of life. They taught us to become furnaces. Everything that passes through you can become fuel for a stronger, brighter fire. But only if you use your anger to forge yourself rather than using yourself as fuel to burn with it. Seneca once warned, "It's not what hurts you, but how you react to it that determines your suffering." In reality, you assign the emotional label to what happens. You're the one feeding or extinguishing the flame, and you decide whether this moment will drag you down or raise your will to a new level. Next time you're angry, don't ask, "Why me?" Ask instead, "What is my soul being trained in?" Maybe it's patience. Maybe it's acceptance. Maybe it's the courage to act without sinking into emotional mud. Anything that disturbs you can become a training curriculum. If you observe closely, every conflict becomes a classroom, every confrontation a test, and every angry impulse a chance to see whether you've truly matured. And never confuse composure with weakness. Composure is the highest form of inner discipline. It's when you have the strength to react but choose not to. It's when you see the flame and walk through it instead of fueling it. The untrained mind grows angry to protect the ego. The trained mind chooses calm to protect the self. 8. Stay in the present, where anger has no room to live. Anger doesn't live in the present. It lives in the memories you refuse to let go of and in the imagined futures that never arrive. It anchors its body in the past and the future, then makes you pay rent with your peace. And you still pay, willingly, blindly, and without negotiation. You're not angry because of this moment. You're angry because yesterday's moment hasn't been cleared, because an old sentence keeps looping in your head, because of an event you wish had gone differently, or because of what you're imagining might happen next. An argument that hasn't happened, a betrayal that's not confirmed, a future scenario your mind builds as if it's already real. Meanwhile, the present, the only place you actually exist, is completely quiet, completely neutral, completely unworthy of explosion. The Stoics understood this better than anyone. They didn't say the past is meaningless, but they knew that living in it endlessly is a form of self-poisoning. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "Confine yourself to the present." That wasn't advice to escape, it was a mental strategy to stay anchored amid unnecessary storms. Because when you are fully present in this moment, there is no space for anger to live. Anger, when stripped of past and future, has nothing left to cling to. It needs long-winded scripts, internal monologues, unsent messages, and fantasies of perfect comebacks. But the present has no room for any of that. The present is just breath, a heartbeat, a hand resting on your knee, a glance, a word, a moment of stillness that needs no explanation. When you truly live in the now, you don't have time for anger, because there's nothing to be angry at. Try to remember the last time you were truly angry, and ask yourself, where were you? You were in something that had already happened. You were replaying a conversation. You were recalling an injustice, or you were imagining how you'd react if it happened again. But you weren't here. Not really. Because if you were fully here, fully in this moment, you'd see it's too simple a space to carry something as heavy as rage. Seneca said, "We suffer more in imagination than in reality." Anger is a form of suffering by imagination. It's the result of being disconnected from the now, and the only way out is not suppression, but return. Return to the present where no one is insulting you, no one is arguing with you, nothing is repeating unless you're the one replaying it in your own mind. Want to stop anger? Train yourself to return to the present as a reflex. When emotion rises, look around. Place your hand on your chest. Breathe. Count the seconds. Ask, in this exact moment, is anything truly hurting me? If the answer is no, then all anger is self-created. And that's the most terrifying truth, but also the most liberating. That you've created most of your storms, and you're also the one who can stop them just by coming back to now. The present is the only place peace can exist. The past is closed. The future hasn't opened. And anger, it only roams when you let your mind drift from the real. Lock the door. Return. Because here in this very moment, you are free. I used to get angry over the smallest things. A careless remark, a message left unanswered, an action that didn't meet my expectations. These things, in hindsight, weren't big enough to hurt me, but because I kept replaying them in my head, I became the one who prolonged the pain. I used to think that showing my anger would make others realize they were wrong. But in truth, anger isn't a sign of strength. It's a crack in the shell of self-control we thought we had built. Every time I got angry, I realized I hadn't truly mastered my inner world. I reacted instead of choosing a response. I tensed up instead of taking a step back to observe. It took me a long time to understand. No one can wound me more deeply than my own thoughts about them. And that to truly be free, I don't need to win arguments, I just need to stop turning my mind into a battlefield. If you found value in this journey, please like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you don't miss future content. But more importantly, return to the principles we've shared, not just to listen to them, but to live by them. Because a trained mind doesn't need to shout to be heard. It only needs to be present, steady, quiet, and unshakable. See you in the next video.